city ordinance is there. We want to put a sign out, or something, which one, put a license. Have a harm.
Are we on?
Yes, the ordinance.
Let's- I was. Release that. All right, we're gonna get started in case we have a smaller group. I want to first apologize, I've got a cold, and you can probably tell by my voice. But I'm not gonna be shaking hands, I don't want to be any babies kids for tonight. So, but that's out too. But we're here for a very serious reason. I wanted to give you about 3 bullet points. Then I'm gonna excuse myself, I'm gonna go to my meeting, and I'm not meeting, my office. So I'm not in here contaminating people, but I really don't feel good. So first of all, we've spent about 3 years trying to figure out if there was any other way we could do this besides bondage. We tried everything. We put this block into this hole and this peg into this notch, and we couldn't get it to work out. So we came to the same conclusion that Mayor Miskell did about 7 years ago, which was a bond issue was about the only way to do it. And but our bond issue is a lot different than his, but we still, we have a bond issue that's structured so it has the least impact, on any of our taxpayers. It also gives us a system to get all the streets paved, and they're gonna tell you about this. I'm not. These guys, they're gonna be doing it. They've been in the trenches with the streets, water, and everything else. But it's a good plan, and it's gonna be presented tonight, and there's plenty of time to answer any questions that you have. So, I'm gonna point out one thing, and then that's it. This chart, this shows where we stand vis-a-vis all the cities. Most of them are in Gasconade County, but some are in Montgomery County and some are in Franklin County. We're 9th out of 9 in the lowest real estate taxes, property taxes. This pie chart shows where the money that we collect goes. And this is the city of Herman, and we get 6% of what we collect. So my house, I pay $1,671 a year on it for real estate taxes, for just the house. Of that $1,671, the city of Herman gets $95.51. So there's not a big pile of money out here. There's not a coal chute that would shovel money down into for a rainy day. It doesn't happen. This big blue thing, that's the schools, and nobody's against paying for schools. We want schools. But they get, let's see, they get 64% of the money. And then we have the House bill that gets 15%. We're this little bitty one that's 6% right here. So that's all I want to say is that we don't have tons of money. We don't collect tons of money. We run our government pretty much on utilities and frugal, good, sound practices that you would use for your house. Now, Bruce and Brian went through the other bond issue. And I would like Bruce to come up. Bruce is the alderman that introduced this the last time in, I guess, November, and brought it up as a motion in January when we voted to put it on here. Bruce and Brian were actually involved in the last go-around when we tried it before, and we didn't quite make it, almost made it. So I thought Bruce might be one to tell you also that whatever he wants to tell you about this bond issue. I'm not going to excuse myself.
But bottom line is, back when Miskell was mayor, the bond passed but didn't pass by enough margin to take effect. The whole problem with the city of Herman, with our tax revenue, with what we have come in, we can only do a block and a half or a little bit more a year. Since I've been an alderman, I don't get very many complaints, but the ones I do are mainly about the streets. So as far as I'm concerned, the only way that we can tackle this and be fair to the citizens and get her done on a timely basis is to go for the bond issue. And it's up to citizens to make that choice. If they do, great. If they don't, we just have to continue on with what we're doing. So, Brian, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, this is a plan that we need 4/7 vote for. It's not a 50% vote. Last time, I think we got 55%.
It was close, but it
not
wasn't
quite
enough.
57.
And this is a much better program than we had last time as far as paying back the bond thing is, we run into trouble here, we can quit, you know, so it's a good program. I'm gonna turn it over to Mark, the city administrator, and let them take it from there.
Okay, thanks Bruce. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mark Wallace, I'm the administrator, City of Herman, and I was asked to try to explain the city's plan for streets. This little brochure that I think you have and others have had around town really explains it well, the problem, the solution, and how much it's going to cost. We're looking at an average Herman home value of $100,000. Assessed value is $19,000. Annual increase of $123.50. That's $10.29 a month, or less than 35 cents a day. That kind of sums up the pocketbook portion of it. As the mayor explained earlier, this is the county tax bill you get, and you can see where most of it goes to the school. City of Herman, out of this big piece of pie, gets 6%, and that's for the general fund, the parks, and the band. Is that correct? Okay. So this 0.382 compared to the school's 4.2896, you can see where the bulk of your county taxes go. And as he also explained, currently we rank number 9 in our assessment, our levy on taxes. After, if this would happen to pass, we'd be number 4. Wouldn't be the top, wouldn't be the bottom, just somewhere in the middle here. I might let Joey speak about how the bond issue works. Joey McCliney from McCliney.
You want me to do it now?
Would you do that?
Sure.
McCliney Company is the bond underwriter, and this is Joey McCliney.
So what we decided is streets don't last, streets you're lucky if they last 10 years. Really lucky if they last 10 years, as you probably know. And so what they did before was they voted a large amount and they thought, okay, we'd pay it back over 10 to 15 years. But the problem with that is you end up doing here, and then nobody else in town gets it for another 10 years until your other bond issue's paid off. And so the thought was, let's issue in tranches, if you will. And so streets do a nice job up until about, and you can speak to this, but I won't put you on the spot, but streets are in great shape the first 4 or 5 years, without a problem. You know, you just think this thing's going to go on forever until it doesn't. And so we thought, do a bond issue for 4 years, and that's why, so you do your first bond issue here, and then you pay it off. And you do your first project, and then you do your second project, and you pay it off. Your third project, and pay it off. So you're, as it says up here, you never exceed having any more than $1.5 million out in the market in any one time. In fact, you know, you have $1.3 million here, but let's say you immediately start paying it off. Now, why you do it this way is short-term interest rates are the least expensive, and general obligation bonds, the bonds that you're issuing, are also the least expensive to issue. So that's the thought, is that you will always have a project going, your levy will stay consistent, and while this goes like this in terms of the bonds outstanding, you're constantly doing projects. Every 4 years, that's where this jump goes. Every 4 years you're going. Now, you get down to year 20, you may have, and you may have $545,000 authorized but not issued to do an additional project. But somewhere in here, you're going to know if this project's working. At any point, the mayor and council can go, this is not working. This is not what we thought it was going to do, and they can extinguish it. Unlike a regular bond issue where you issue the bonds and then you're done. And you're thinking, well, darn it, after 5 years or after 10 years, we blew it. You are constantly evaluating this program, and you can change it. And you can change it about every 4 years as you go along. So that's the approach. You're always doing starting projects. You know, you start a project year 0, and it probably takes that year to do it, and you're always looking at it, you're always evaluating. This basically triples your current budget for streets. And so that was the approach. It lets you continually do this without having a great deal of liability, without having a huge jump in your levy.
Any questions for Mr. McCliney?
I have a question. At the end of your outstanding bonds, at the end of, 21 years, you have $1,158,379.
Am
The
I?
schedule that was given to me.
Okay, it's probably the schedule I ran, because I know you and I were talking about it. Here, I'm looking at this one, and these are outstanding bonds. You issue $1,500,000, and so this would go for several more years. This would go for 4 more years.
Okay, so 20.
20 is not the end, but what I'm trying to do is just illustrate, you cannot issue a GO bond for longer than 20 years. However, you could issue in year 10, you could issue a bond for 20 years. So I just didn't want to keep going until I was out of every penny. And hopefully, these are ideas right now, if things were static in these assumptions, but for example, if interest rates jumped, these amounts will be smaller. If interest rates went down, you might be able to issue a few more dollars in bonds. So if your growth rate went in the wrong direction, you can adjust. And that's kind of the idea of having every 4 years to evaluate, have we grown, have we shrunk? You have the opportunity to stop and pull back your horns if necessary.
Could you say that every 4 years you get a new bond?
Every 4 years you're going to reissue. That's exactly right. And every 4 years you just look and say, is this working? Is there a reason? Maybe we go 5 years. Maybe the rate is a little better at 5 years and it doesn't cost us anymore. Or maybe rates went really high. We're going to stay at 3 years and revolve it. But you always are evaluating it.
And we can stop the program at
any point.
Everywhere.
So you let's say you issue here and year 2 rolls around and you get an entirely new council or board of aldermen. You think, and they say, no, we're not doing this anymore. They can authorize the entire amount and retire the entire amount at that same meeting, and game's over, bonds are gone. I wouldn't recommend that, but
Any other questions?
At that time, the property tax goes back to what it is.
that is exactly right. That is exactly right.
So after every 4 years, if you want to do another bond segment for another 4 years, does your property tax then go up?
No.
Again?
So this is, so that's why we have it. Why it's $1,300,000 here and $1,400,000 all the way down in year 16 and $1,500,000 in year 20 is I'm putting in a growth of your assessed valuation, but your levy will stay the same, assuming my growth is right. But let's say I used a 2% growth rate. Let's say I'm just way off and it's 0. Well, this year you're going to issue $1,30,000, and this year you're going to issue $1,30,000 to keep your levy about the same. Any other questions? Well, everybody has my phone number. You're welcome to call anytime, and I'm happy to give numbers out anytime.
Thank you very much. Getting to a little bit of the meat and potatoes now, I guess, on the streets that we've kind of chosen for the first phase and why. And I'll get the street superintendent Todd up here with me to kind of help me. Come on up, Todd. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the yellow streets here are the first phase. These are some of the streets that we'd like to fix first in the first 4 years. This pink is the streets that I've done in the last close to 5 years, I guess. What I did when I first took over, as I looked at the amount of money we had, which wasn't much, and it costs about $36,000 to just mill down and overlay a street, one city block. Okay, in a perfect world, which nobody lives in a perfect world, if we could just mill down every street and redo it, we'd be talking $36,000 a block, basically. But what people don't realize is the infrastructure under the street. You've got water lines, you've got bad gas lines, things like that. It doesn't make any sense to fix a street. And you guys have driven through town, you see all these patches and everything that have been cut up. You know, you do a street, and the water line breaks. It's just not feasible. Some streets, a lot of streets don't have base. I think the paper quoted me last time as saying 80% of our streets didn't have any base. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that's right, but it's probably pretty close. The streets that I have dug up in the last 5 years, I've found very little base on any of them. And you know, if if you replace your base in the streets and you do your infrastructure first, your water lines and things of that nature, you know, like he said, you know, the street looks great the first 5 years, but there are ways to put treatment on streets and things like that. So once you get these streets up and in good shape, there's ways to, you know, to maintain them. And I've seen, you know, I've seen streets be done, and then that's the end of it. But you've got other factors. You've got salt and cinders in the wintertime. You've got sunlight. I mean, look at a brand new street. It's black when you start. In a year, it's a light gray color, and that continues to chip it up. Your worst enemy is water. A lot of our streets are flat. You need to have a dome. You got to have good curb and gutters. It doesn't make any sense to do a street without doing the curb and gutters. Some of the figures I had, if you go through and put 10 or 12 inches of rock down, and we'd have contractors come in and do this because they can do this a lot faster than we can. Our street department is basically a maintenance crew. But we're to the point now where we have to become a rebuilding crew because the streets are pretty bad. The first 5 years, I picked streets that I could just overlay that had decent curb and gutter. But I'm down to the point now where I don't have that anymore. So this is the step that we're trying to take with the bond. We have what we call half-cent sales tax. And half-cent sales tax pays for a variety of things. It pays for your salt and cinders. It pays for repairs on your equipment, things like that. But there's one line item in half cent, and that's $33.55. And that particular line item, you can only use that line item on the streets, and that's for your asphalt, your rock, things of that nature. On an average, I've gotten around $120,000 a year to work with. And when you do 2 streets, you're already down to $75,000. You've used $75,000 of your 120, and you have to work with the rest of that for a whole year. That's pretty hard to do sometimes, you know, by the time you purchase. And I can tell you right now, I went way over budget on salt and cinders this year. So, you know, those are just some of the factors. I'm not standing up here trying to tell you how to vote. I'm just telling you that, you know, we're short on money for the streets. And to do the streets properly, if you tear one down with 10 inches of base, you put in curb and gutter and everything, you're talking about $125,000 per block. And a block runs about 640 feet, and usually the streets are 28 to 32 feet wide. A lot of our streets are flat. Water's your worst enemy. Water sits on them. That's where you see the alligator cracking in the streets. You've got to get a dome on those streets.
And most people know that Herndon isn't a flat town. When you say flat,
Yeah.
you mean the road surface is flat.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
And it should be crowned so the water runs through the gutters and
Yeah,
down.
it should be going to the gutters. Unfortunately, our gutters aren't very good either, you know, so.
The water
I
gets
know
under.
we've got some pretty good ones by our house. I drove a Volkswagen and that I had to get rid of because I couldn't get in my driveway without dragging the undercarriage off. We're
unfortunate. We live in a pretty hilly town, and I'd be glad to let anybody ride with me in a snowplow some night if they want to. That's not any fun. But, you know, that's just some of the things that Mark pointed out. And, you know, Wayne and I, we went all over town. We went to every street, and we got footages on every bit of curb and gutter that we think should be replaced. You know, if the bond issue goes through, there's sections of curb and gutter we probably won't replace. We're just going to replace what's bad. Sometimes, though, if you take a block of street and 80% of your curb and gutter is bad, it doesn't pay to save that 20%. The company can come in and rip that out faster and get rid of it and just have it new up and down the line, you know. But it's been a battle.
I want to mention a little bit, Todd, about we kind of picked to kind of prioritize our streets. We looked at the high traffic areas, and we designated those as mostly the east-west streets that pretty well go all the way across town, and north and south also. And then we talked with Wayne, Public Works Director, and he has identified streets that have really bad water lines. A lot of the old water lines in town are from the I guess 20s and 30s probably. It's 4-inch cast iron pipe. So before we do any paving in these purple streets, there has to be water lines replaced. Just doesn't make any sense otherwise. So that's what this map comes into being is the phase one. And a lot of these streets, some of these streets actually don't have any utilities in them at all. The utilities are in easements that run behind the homes. So these streets we can go in and get at them right away. Very first thing we're going to do is core samples.
Yeah.
You want to explain that?
Core sampling is when you have a company come in and they drill into your road, and I'd say it's about, what, 6 inches, Wayne, probably in diameter, and it gives you a sample of what your base is like. Now, I know we talk about how much the streets cost and everything, but there may be streets out there that don't need any base. There might be base on them already, and then we'll be that much farther ahead of ourselves. But we won't know that until we get core samples. And we're going to core sample, every street that we want to do. This yellow part in the first phase, we need to core sample all of those, and log that and find out what we've got underneath there. But, and the first, like Mark mentioned too, the first thing I'd like to do is tear into some of the streets that have the bad curb and gutter, which we've never been able to do before, and completely repair the streets that might need 10 or 12 inches of base rock, but there's no water line in them. So that completely takes the water line out of the equation the first couple years. That way Wayne and his guys will have time to get water lines replaced, and then the following year we'll attack some of those streets. So.
You touch base on it. I think the average street is 22 foot wide.
28 to 32, some of them,
I
yeah.
just noticed some of the vehicles have gotten wider over
Oh,
the
yeah.
years. I know, like Schiller Street, cars parked on both sides, it's
Oh, yeah.
almost down to one traffic lane.
Sure is.
As we redo those, will we widen those streets any?
I don't know if there's any room too wide in Schiller Street.
That's just an example.
With the sidewalk grant and everything, they've got new sidewalks there already.
It might be to the edge of the easement or right away anyway.
Could be to the edge of the easement.
West 7th from Washington to Mozart, there's the drain there is no curbing at all
Uh-huh.
for certain.
Well, and I don't know if it ever would fly in Herman, but in the city of Washington, they have some streets you can't park on one side. And I don't know, like you say, we get more and more traffic in the downtown area. I don't know if that would work or not. That's not up to me, but that's just basically something. We've got some streets that could be widened also, like your street, Susan. That's pretty narrow, but we'd have to take probably 15 feet of the neighbor's yard across the street and move all the poles to widen that to where it would be the legal 28 feet wide.
You can take some of ours so we don't have so much grass to
Yeah, well, I don't know if it works like that. But, yeah, I mean, we're open for all options.
Because while we're in the process of doing it, if we have a narrow street and we can get the easement
If we can
in
get it,
there.
yeah.
Well, most of those streets, they may be narrow, but they were platted with the proper width. Most of the streets in town are 60 feet right of way. So you've got basically 30 feet of street and 15 feet on each side for curb gutter sidewalk. So that gives you your 60 feet. But most of the streets, I think, are platted that way. They just didn't get built that way.
Yeah, a lot of folks may not realize that, if you're just a few feet off the street, your front yard is probably the easement itself. It probably is. I know it is in the downtown area. A bunch of them are like that.
And the perfect example of your Hospital Hill here without any curbs or gutters.
Mm-hmm.
You want to watch a street get smaller as time goes on. It just keeps knocking it in. And so if you don't have curbs and gutters, you get smaller streets. It's just the nature of it. And when someone says, hey, let's blacktop over it, well, it's a waste of blacktop, but you get a pretty street for a while until it starts chipping away again, and then it starts shrinking again.
Yeah, curb and gutters definitely get the water to the storm drains. It keeps it off your streets.
Keeps it from getting under the street, freezing and thawing, and then you
Yeah,
start.
every time you make a cut in a street, like a water line breaks or something, that's a potential spot for water to get in there, and it's just like Well, it's just like a roof. If you've got a hole in your roof and you patch it, you might get by for a while. But you really need to put a new roof on it, basically, is what it amounts to. We're at the point right now where we're patching those roofs right now because, as a street, because we just don't have the money to put the new streets in. You know?
I'll say for Todd and his department, they've done a lot with a little bit of money that they have. They're making the most of it. And they've also implemented a sealer type program for some of the streets that have been operated. Gives you a little extra life at a very small price.
Yeah, Cam Industries out of Illinois comes in, and I'm sure you guys have seen it. It looks like cat litter that you put down on the road. It's kind of dusty. It's actually an emulsifier. It brings the asphalt back to life. The reason I did it whenever I first took over was the fact that, like I said before, the streets that I figured out that I could overlay, that had a decent base and a decent curb and gutter, I did that. But we also covered a whole bunch of the other streets with this CRF. Now, by no means is that a fix. It's not a fix. But my objective was to buy us time. And what that did, I'm not saying it stopped all the potholes, but it cut our cold mix consumption in half. And also cut down manpower in half by putting this stuff down on the ground. Now, if your streets are in really good shape, this stuff is going to last you 7, 8, 9 years. Our streets aren't that good a shape. If you get 5 out of it, you're doing good. The advantage of this stuff is it's put down at anywhere from 99 cents a square yard to $2 a square yard. It costs as much as $17 a square yard to overlay a street. So, and once those streets are overlaid, that's when this stuff from Cam Industries really shines, because you're putting it on a new street. And that's the point we want to get to. When I first started, we didn't have good streets to put it on. But now we're getting to the part where we've fixed a few streets and we've got this stuff down. I plan to do some more this year. I usually set aside about $15,000 from this company to treat the streets and things like that, so they don't get gray and so the salt doesn't penetrate and things like that. And that's what I stated before. A lot of the streets were done years ago, and that was as far as they went with them. I mean, they looked good for quite a while, but the sunlight eats them up, the salt eats them up. If the street's not concave and sheds its water, you get a flat spot. That's where you get your alligator cracking, and our trucks are heavy.
What do they weigh?
Yeah, I mean, everybody complains about the trash trucks, but we still got to pick up the trash, and most of them are in the alleys. If this goes through, Wayne and I talked about maybe patching and repairing some of the alleys. I'm not talking about a complete rebuild of the alleys, because I don't want to do that, because those trucks are just going to continue to go down those alleys because they don't have any other choice. But we could fix some of the alleys. I think people are looking at me when I'm out on the street and I'm fixing an alley rather than a main thoroughfare of a street. They're like, why in the world is he fixing that alley when we've got streets out here to be fixed, But if we do get the bond and we can get some of these streets fixed, there may be money available to fix some of the alleys too.
The one that's living on the alley you're fixing, they're not saying that though.
Yeah, probably not, no.
They're saying, good, he's out there
Well,
fixing.
sometimes the alleys get so bad you can't really.
Yeah, we have to fix the alleys sometimes. They just get so bad that, And like I said before, alleys don't have curb and gutter. So streets are designed to have a dome where the water goes to the curb and gutter. The alleys are going to have to be designed to have a 4% invert in them, so the water runs down the middle. So you don't want it running in the yards and stuff.
So question,
Sure.
the money that would be allocated out of this system that you're looking at, we have a really bad bridge right there on Market Street, down by the Ford dealership. Is any of the money going to go toward
That's
any of that repair?
state highway.
So state is the one that we should be talking to about that.
And state does have that bridge in their scope. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 years before they do anything. But that's going to be quite an undertaking, because if they get that above the floodplain, at the flood stage, it's going to impact those businesses along there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a little different design that they're going to think about quite a bit. So we may The city may try to enhance the bridge a little bit with some lighting or something down the line, but it's not our bridge to replace at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately too, some of your streets, and for the folks that have lived here, they're underwater a lot. And water doesn't do a good thing to a street. And as soon as that street is opened up, traffic's driving on it, and it's like driving on a sponge. You know, it doesn't do the street any good.
You just brought up about the bridge here on Crane Creek. Thinking ahead 4 years, 5 years, as we do like 6th Street, because if that's closed down, probably West 6th to Washington around to 100 will be the traffic flow. So if those are on there, should we concentrate being prepared for that traffic?
Yeah, if they've got a bad water line in it for first, I don't think we'll try to tackle it right away. It might be the following year. But if you notice, Jim, did you see the counter that they got on Washington? Did you see that today?
Yes, well, I think actually.
They're actually trying to figure out how much traffic we've got going down Washington because we're in the middle of a flood grant that we got.
Flood detour study.
Yeah, and we're trying to GPS all of the, I'm sure you've seen the white flags on Washington and around town, and it's going to be a lot like a snow route. And you've lived here most of your life. You know where you can go when the water's up, and that's what we're going to try to do. Is direct traffic through town the best way we can. It's going to happen again. I'm not going to, as well as I do, it's going to flood again.
The first off, we're going to try and keep the trucks off.
Right. The big tractor trailer trucks, we've even talked to the state about the city workers being out on the highway at 94 by Luter Market and stopping the traffic out there, the trucks, and turning them around.
They come into town and they get lost and they try to go through residential areas, and a couple of times we've had them where they just tore up a yard.
And streets.
And streets.
Yeah.
They're just
I mean, it's...
Our little streets aren't made for that kind of traffic.
No, Herman's an old town.
80,000 pounds.
Yeah.
That's not, 80,000 is a semi.
Yeah.
Your trash trucks are 50 to 60. And so that's a substantial amount more coming in.
And I repair a lot of streets. Somebody will say, well, I've got a pothole here. Well, I'll patch that pothole the best way I can. But even our 550 trucks, if you're standing there and that truck drives by, you can see that street move. So there's not much base on it.
And we can fill the school buses
Yeah.
a block before they get to the house.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if this does pass, we will get these streets in such a shape that 20 years from now, you won't have to go back and do all this. You won't have to dig the whole street out and replace the base. You just have to come in and overlay it.
It's definitely going to benefit the folks that come after us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is that where the continuing bond issues will come into play? Is once the streets are completely repaired, then all that money gets sunk into maintenance?
Well, actually, your levy disappears. So,
Okay, yeah.
So while that shows 21 years, it would probably go to a full 25 if everything was as smooth as I laid out there. It's never that smooth. But you're voting 8 million and 4 million. How many bonds are we voting?
8.1.
8.1, and then you're spreading it out over a 20-year period, 21 year at that. Once that's been paid, you don't go again. Your levy is gone.
Okay.
And so, for example, if you go the 20 years, let's say as I mentioned, you have no growth, you'll probably have 2 or 3 million remaining in that last year that you could do it again. But the idea is fix them right, do it over a long period of time, so you're always fixing street, you're always putting down the proper base, and so the next time, if in year 20, and this program has worked exactly as designed, you think, this has worked nicely, we don't need to vote another 8, but we'll go 4 to resurface all of them again.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the idea, it's
So
let's
in the
prove
meantime,
ourselves.
then, are we maintaining what was done during the last 4-year period?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
and you
and
got that base, that's the key.
That's where your street department comes in as a maintenance crew and not a rebuilding crew, which is something, we haven't been able to do You know, if we do all the, let's do all the streets tomorrow, what if we do them all tomorrow, what's gonna happen in 20 years?
That's why I was.
They're all gonna be ready to go
That's my
again.
mind here, you know.
So, you know, if we do 4 or 5 a year, and I don't know what the money factor's gonna be or what the base is like, and you look back, well, we did those 4 16 years ago, those are the ones that are gonna get, you know, done first the following, after 20 years is over, you know. So each step, every 4 or 5 years, you can look back and say, well, these streets have this age on them. These are the ones that we want to be maintained.
Unfortunately, streets don't last, and,
No.
and so it is a constant renewal. But if you do it right the first time, then the renewal is not expensive. You got that base in there, it's getting harder as time goes by, and then it's an overlay versus this is a total redo, and the streets are just, unfortunately, and it comes down to budget. Sometimes you think, well, let's just put down 2-4 inches and hope for the best and move on our way. If there's no base there, that's not going to last at all.
Yeah.
And you can't really do that. If you don't have curb and gutters in a town, you could probably put down 2 or 3 inches of asphalt on top. If you've got a really bad road, you put on top. But you have to have a transition between the curb and the gutter, and the asphalt has to be smooth for the water factors, and it's a trip hazard, you know. So, you know, I've seen some of the streets that, you know, they've overlaid, and some of the streets, you know, you've got your gutter here and your street's this high going into the gutter. Well, you know, you can only put so much back on it, you know, before it has to be taken down and properly done.
That's where we're at.
Yeah, you're right. That's where we're at. The streets are full of tons of chip and seal that have just been put on year after year after year. And
We did some core sampling a few years ago, and it's just funny to see the different layers.
different layers, yeah.
Asphalt, rock, chip and seal, asphalt, chip and seal. It's just patch and pray.
Right.
Patch and pray.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
You're more than welcome to come up, take a look at these
it's,
charts,
yeah.
and middle around our meeting will start in about 20 minutes. We'll have to get these out of here probably about 10 till, so you can come up. You got anything to ask Mr. McCliney or myself or Todd?
Yeah, we do have a paver too, and there is some stuff that we do in-house, but a lot of times it's very small stuff, like we were going to finish C-Tal this year. So, you know, that's some of the money that comes out of half cent also, that I set back about $30,000 every year for our in-house projects. That takes care of our cold mix and things like that that we have to get, so.
When you talk about the hot mix, though, you got to have a fleet of trucks delivering
Sure.
that stuff.
And we've only got 1 or 2 trucks, and it's just, you know, you can do a couple hundred feet a day, you know. So, you know, if you have a contractor come in, it's just 1 truck rolling right after the other. And people say, well, you know, that's going to cost a lot of money. In the long run, you know, for us to tear a block down, and I've seen it done before, it took them, what, a month and a half, 2 months on Gellert, I believe. And just luckily nobody lived on that street, but that was 2 months where in the middle of the summer they tackled it, and we also mow grass. We mow a lot of grass. Well, everything else was out of control, you know. Where if you had a contractor come in, they could have been done in about 2 days' time and saved you a lot of money. So.
Well, any more questions, or, like I said, if you want to come up, take a look at the charts.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to answer your questions, and hang around for a while. Like I said, the regular board meeting starts at 7, so we'll have to get him out of here before then, but
The election's a week from tomorrow.
that's right.
So if
April
you're savor of it, vote early, vote often.
2nd. This isn't Chicago.
Yeah, that's right. If you're not, vote Wednesday.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
This.